Hello, my name is Bendistis, and this is a short video lecture on the use of Lexis for statutes and secondary authority. The title of the article, Lexis is a dumb computer, is bringing up the fact that Lexis is easier to understand if you know what you are getting from Lexis. I think that going into Lexis and assuming that you can find everything the exact same way, I'll just throw all the words in my search bar and won't worry about anything from there, is a very, will be confusing when you get into different areas. And I think noting how different sections of Lexis are organized can help you kind of figure it out. For if you haven't watched part one, the point of this title is that I compared Lexis to video game systems, where when you first start playing video games, they're impossible. But once you realize the nuances of it, once you realize that Madden can't cover the tight end and you can score touchdowns all the time, it's easier to understand. You can kind of take advantage of how the system works. So what I'm going to be doing is going over statutes and 4 different sections of secondary authority to kind of vet out the fact of like, what do you need to know to search these topics? And kind of keeping these in mind, I think will be really helpful at figuring out exactly what to do. Now, the big 3 steps with using Lexis is searching the database, finding the correct search terms, and reading through the materials. Searching through the database, for here you either want to go to statutes or secondary material and kind of noting where everything is located. I'll kind of cover these in individual slides. Search terms sometimes are applicable, sometimes not, and then reading through the materials. For the search terms, I would note, please watch part 1 of this video for a further discussion on like the terms and connectors, the root expanders, and the quotation marks, because I think they might be helpful, and I'm going to kind of infer some of that with a little bit of the advice, but I do think that that's a worthwhile note from before. The first thing we're going to go over is statutes in the American jurisprudence. The reason why I'm covering them together is that they're somewhat set up similarly, right? So statutes are all the laws, and the American jurisprudence is your encyclopedias. Now, encyclopedias are, an inch deep and a mile wide. So essentially it covers all different topics, and they're organized similarly like statutes, titles of broad topics of law, and then sort of subsections that go into very particular sections. So when we talk about how to search both of these, I think they have a similar structure. The first is that both will have a table of contents that will contain the broad topics that you're looking for. The reason why I would start there, so if you know that you have a topic that you're interested in, let's say that you're interested in searching up DUI law, right? I would look through the DUI subsections and the motor vehicle subsections for both of those first. It'll allow you to sort of parachute into a general section of law, because more often than not, there's not one answer that's important, but all the surrounding answers are important too. So if you try to just isolate one section, one law, you may be limiting your understanding or knowledge of the material. A good example would be landlord-tenant law. So landlord-tenant law has so many nuances to it that if you just try to get one section of it, you're probably going to miss out on all the other points. So my first suggestion with both of these are try to find where you're located in the table of contents to get a broader view. You can browse. Who doesn't like browsing, right? It's the fun of life and shopping. If you can't find anything, and that's common, the terms and connectors are perfectly fine if you're like totally lost. The one big thing I want to note is that you can actually search just subsections. So one of the reasons why I wouldn't just jump to the table, to the search in terms and connectors, is that if you know a big broad title, like let's say again, you're looking up DUI law, you can just search the DUI code, or you can just search the DUI subsection of the American jurisprudence. It'll limit the extraneous responses that you're getting. And one of the things I want to note about both of these is because they both have annotations, which are summaries of case law that relate to the broader points, is that your search terms can sometimes go completely insane, where if you're looking up DUI law, you might end up getting a jury instruction section for both because there's a DUI case that relates to those issues, or like a representation issue or an evidence problem. So I think that if you limit it to those sections, I think it can be really helpful. What I like about both of these is that I think you can learn a lot about the broad problem, which should help your research in a broader way. The thing I would note about both of these, and the reason why I would use these search terms, is that they'll give you the words that are helpful for further search along with your case law discussion. Meaning that if you're looking for something on DUI law and you're noticing that they're not saying car, they're saying vehicle or automobile, that allows you to sort of put a better search term and better word onto where the problem goes. So I think that like browsing these sections first can be really helpful for getting the research that you're really looking for in a broader way. treatises. So what treatises are next are like books. So that's the best way to describe treatises. They're books written by people. The thing I'll note about Lexis Advanced is I don't know that their treatise section is really all that helpful. They have like some books, but not all books. It's not like a library that's available to you. So what I would really do is try to find a specific treatise first by looking through like some of the subsections that are available to you before just searching everything and then kind of going through the table of contents. For example, if you're looking for a jurisdiction on a treatise on corporate law, Delaware is a fantastic state. So if you go to treatises, go to state-specific treatises for Delaware, they'll have a treatise for Delaware and then search through there. The reason why I wouldn't just search the business judgment rule in all treatises is you're going to get like legit thousands of results. So if you're not able to search them, I think that this can be a very confusing and unhelpful search. Full disclosure, I very rarely use treatises on Lexis because I don't think the structure is as good as just sort of reading the book. I think you're limiting yourself in a way that is not entirely helpful. So it's possible. I don't think it's most effective. The one thing I will note is that commonly when you search, at least on Lexis Advanced, on the left-hand side, they'll have like a description of the treatises. So it'll tell you whether it's a practice guide, whether it's something else, and that can be helpful to limit it down. So the key thing here is try to find a treatise first, then use the table of contents, then worst comes to worst, use terms and connectors. However, terms and connectors can be a little bit difficult. So if you can't really find something that's helpful, say la vie. Periodicals. The thing about periodicals, they're magazines, fancy legal magazines. And noting what you want about a periodical first, I think, is a very important discussion before jumping into them. So basically they are, magazines, like I said. So you want the best magazine to be able to search something. Like if you're just putting any old term in, you're going to get, again, thousands of magazines that are sort of related to it. And I think one of the big things about periodicals is the main reason I would use a periodical is to understand a specific case. I have something down here. Whole Women's Health is a very recent abortion case before the Supreme Court. If I know that I'm looking for that, that will give me a very limited amount of responses rather than just something like abortion. If you put abortion into periodicals, good luck. You're going to get tens of thousands of responses. That's not going to be that helpful. So I think if you are, again, limiting to what you're looking for, noting what the source is, making sure you're getting the best periodicals, and then making sure it's more recent, I think it can be helpful. But noting the fact that periodicals, noting what they are, will help their search. But if you go again to them, focus on the case, not so much the law that you've gotten from before, and I think you'll be good. American Law Reports. American Law Reports are the Ryan Howard of law. I don't know if that reference is moot to you. He is a famous Philadelphia Phillies baseball player. He's my favorite baseball player of all time. Toward the end of his career, he was a strikeout or a home run, and that is what American Law Reports are. Essentially, if you get the best law report, it is an article that summarizes how a weird factual legal problem is vetted out through all jurisdictions. So if you have a problem that, let's say, a customer is assaulted by an employee and that customer is suing the employer, they will tell you how every jurisdiction resolves that problem with all nuances. Again, it's really helpful law, but noting what that issue is, I think, can help you research it. So because it's factually specific, you need to reference those facts in your search engine. I think more facts, the better, and more narrow that you can get to it is there. If you can't find an ALR, don't beat your head against the ground because, again, it can be a strikeout sometimes. So if you're looking for something, don't waste a lot of time on it. If you can't find something soon, it's just possible no one's written an ALR article about your problem. The one thing I want to note about an ALR article is it often will include a lot of, again, annotations, like I mentioned before, a lot of other citations. Why that's important is when you get an article, look through those citations to see if, one, there's something more apt for what you're looking for, but also making sure that you are not getting stuck in your terms and connectors there. Because sometimes if you put a lot of things like employee, customer, employer, assault, you should probably only be getting a few answers. But if you're getting 150, you might be like, why is all this coming up? And it's possible that the ALRs that are there are citing your ALR and then kind of clicking on that jumping to it by hitting the Control F and searching where your terms are, I think can be a really helpful way to sort of, again, cheat the system, for lack of a better term. The last one is the restatement. I'm going to shorten. There we go. The restatement is essentially like pseudo rules that are created by legal scholars. This is a little mix of everything. So they have specific sections of the restatement that are there. They have agency, torts, contracts, property. I would very, very highly recommend limiting your search to that. So making sure that you're not searching everything is really the crux with all of this lecture. Don't try to bite off everything. Limit it in a very specific way. I think the terms and connectors can be really helpful here instead of the table of contents, because the restatement is so legally dense. If you're able to parachute in somewhere, like let's say it tells you you are in the 3rd edition of the Restatement of Contracts, section 265. If you go back into the table of contents with section 265 and look at 264, 266, 267, that allows you to browse. So that's a suggestion I would have here. The one thing I would note is that the restatement is not just the rule, but it's usually issues and comments. It's sort of like an explanation of things. So noting the fact that there's a lot of extraneous information with the restatement, you can sometimes get stuff that's not as relevant, or your terms might be included in there. So noting the fact that the best part of the restatement is the rules, but the issues and comments, if you're getting a lot of hits within the terms you're using, are worth searching through there. Now, secondary authority can seem daunting, so I don't want it to seem like it's impossible to use. More aptly, I just want to note that secondary authority can be really helpful for doing your research for you, or getting information in a place where you didn't know what the answer was. These things are often daunting, but if you can handle them, right? Like if you can learn how to ride the dragon, for lack of a better term, I really think that it can expand your research more creatively, but also more substantively. Because if these secondary authorities or statutes are giving you words that you've never heard before, putting those words into the case law terms, again, that can really narrow your search to give you the answer that you're looking for. So do not ignore the secondary authority and the things that are covered here. All right, thank you guys very much. If you're interested in other videos, you can search my name through YouTube and other things will appear. You can also look at my podcast, which is The Citizen's Guide to the Supreme Court, which is located through iTunes and other podcast mediums. Thank you guys very much for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.